After a while, I started to realize that a lot of the energy that we were putting into that was out of a need or desire for the business to succeed,
Mm.
and less about where our own personal energies, high energy zones come from, like what truly fuels us day to day to keep going, which when you're an entrepreneur, I think you have to stay really true to that and really close to that because it will become harder. The more you scale, the more responsibility you bring on, the more money you make. There are different challenges there.
Welcome to Overwhelmed and Over It, the podcast where founders come to drop the hustle culture BS and learn how to actually enjoy building their business. I'm your host, Gabs, and I believe your success as a founder shouldn't come at the cost of your sanity. Each week, we bring you real, unfiltered conversation with founders who are figuring it out just like you are. No sugarcoating, no highlight reels, just honest stories and actionable lessons that help you navigate your founder journey with more clarity and confidence. Whether you're building your first company or scaling your fifth, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Dane, I'm so excited to introduce you to the Overwhelmed and Over It community today. We have built a great friendship over just kind of shared professional backgrounds and meeting each other on LinkedIn, and have even gotten a chance to meet in person now, which is really cool. Sometimes you don't ever actually get to meet your internet friends in real life. So I'm glad we got to do that. So Dane, I'd love to hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself to the Overwhelmed and Over It community.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's funny because I've spent like multiple years in jobs through COVID, having not met people I worked with. And it's great we got to meet up in Arizona and grab a bite and a coffee. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I have spent the last 10 years in talent acquisition and early stage startups for the most part. Started a career in the Bay Area doing early stage talent development and recruiting work, and now have a recruiting agency for the past 2 years. So I'm giving the founder thing a try, and it's been a ton of fun and a lot of learnings. Excited to chat and be a resource and a voice for folks who are also going through it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely why we do this, right? Because I think so many times being founders, even if you have a co-founder, which I know you do, and I love her dearly, and as I do in one of my businesses as well, but even then, you can still feel alone in this journey of like no one else truly understands what's keeping you up at night or truly understands what's just like weighing heavy on you, or we all have our own lessons along the way. And so I appreciate that you were willing to come on and be a voice. And I think especially I'm really excited to hear your insights for two reasons. One, you're a dual founder family, right? So I think that adds a unique layer to it. But also, you have gone into talent acquisition in tech in some of the craziest times that any of us that are currently in tech remember. And so I think you have an added layer of stress there that has been an interesting piece of your journey.
I call it an added layer of fun, but yes, it's stressful. It's a really interesting journey, right? And I think Kayla, my co-founder, and I, we saw a lot of inefficiencies in just recruiting in general. So we took it as almost a challenge. Like if we can make it work in this market, then we can make it work in any market. And it's been a lot of fun. And like you mentioned, my wife Lauren, she has a health tech startup that she's been working at for a couple of years now. And it's hard. I think some days you definitely feel the energy and the groove around the business, and some days you really have to pull out the motivation to like take another call, go to another meetup, take another coffee meeting, just hoping that as long as you're working in the same directions consistently and being intentional with how you're making moves in the business. And it often time no, it always really goes hand in hand with personal life too, right? So like I always feel like there's a very nuanced approach to just how I think about the business, and it's bled so much into personal life. So I'm always like, I'm on a, vacation somewhere trying to take time off, and I'm still like, I hear a conversation at the restaurant table next to me. I'm like, that could be a potential client. I should probably list. I should go introduce myself, and I have to create that boundary for myself. But that's the good and the bad, right? I mean, I think some of the fun of entrepreneurship is you really get to like wholeheartedly, give something a try and put your all into it. And it very much becomes a part of the full life journey versus just like, a job where you're bound to these specific outcomes. It's like every day is completely different when you're building your own thing.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, in a good way, the sky's the limit, right? There's no limitations. If you want to work 24/7, 365, by all means, be your guest. You may burn out, but try it.
Right.
Like you can choose to go on vacation and then engage in a conversation with someone, and you can make this decision of like, this is not just a job and I'm on PTO. So, like, my wall is up and I'm not working. I'm not thinking about work. You just never know who you're going to meet at any point in the world and what doors that may open for yourself or for them. And so you get to make that choice of, do I let that bleed in or do I not? I remember taking my first true vacation since I had stepped into entrepreneurship where I knew I was going to be disconnected, like zero connection. And I remember this moment of panic, like, what's going to happen when I can't even check my email or look at Slack for 5 days? Is the world going to come to an end? Because when you're grinding so hard every day as a founder, you think like one day off, 5 days away, whatever it may be, it's all going to come to an end. Spoiler alert, it didn't blow up. Everything was fine. But like, you do carry that stress and that pressure sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah, I found that a lot of the daily routine is what's been the most helpful for me to create balance day to day. So I try and like eat lunch outside, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes in between meetings, right? It doesn't have to be a full hour or anything like that. I bought a standing desk. So I can stand and be like somewhat mobile, an ergonomic chair. So I like feel like I'm not just slouching and sitting all the time. And I think that helps the energy levels continue to push through, but also just I try and make it feel less like work and more
Mhm.
just like I'm having engaging, fun conversations with people who are doing interesting things in areas that also support my own professional goals, right? And I think that reframe has been helpful. Very hard to set boundaries in entrepreneurship. I think that's still something I'm trying. It's just in flux. But those daily rituals where it's just drink X amount of water or do the meal prep delivery service so I don't like not eat because I have to cook, and I don't have time to cook anymore. So it's a balance, and I think everyone's different and goes through the rotations of if they have kids, you have different school pickups and things like that, or you have to walk your dog. Like you can use some of those things to your advantage to create some structure throughout the day.
When you think back on your journey up until this point, is there kind of one like massive light bulb moment or major breakthrough that really changed the way you looked at your journey as a founder?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it was probably the moment when we decided to have less structure. So it's a little counterintuitive. The first year of business, we were very much like, this is how we should set it up. We should have a brand and content strategy. We should do this number of articles. We should optimize for this level of response rate when we're reaching out to candidates. We should try and reach out to this many clients every single week. And I think after a while, I started to realize that a lot of the energy that we were putting into that was out of a need to want, like a need or desire for the business to succeed,
Mm,
and less about where our own personal energies, like high energy zones, come from, like what truly fuels us day to day to keep going. Which when you're an entrepreneur, I think you have to stay really true to that and really close to that, because it will become harder. The more you scale, the more responsibility you bring on, the more money you make. There are different challenges there. And I think once we reset and realized that wasn't really working, even though that's like logically where you should be focusing to make sure you're hitting metrics and continuing to grow and just have targets that you can aim for. I think releasing that control a little bit was maybe the light bulb moment, at least for me. And it started to become like less pressure in terms of specific outcomes and more of a every week I want to go to an event where there are founders that I can connect to locally. And of those founders, I want to have coffee with two people the following week. Like small goals like that tend to reap bigger rewards, especially in talent acquisition and recruiting. It's very much a personal game, right? Like changing a job is a huge decision. It affects people's personal lives. Companies are under pressure. It's very much a personal decision and impacts the organization when you bring in a recruiting partner. So for us, we started shifting back and focusing more on relationships we had already developed, but also just having more of that intentional approach to we want to solve interesting problems with interesting people. Let's follow that in whatever zone we're getting pushed in versus we need to hit these things every quarter. And if we don't, we're failing as a business.
Oh, I resonate so much with that. And probably some of it's just coming from us being in the tech startup world even before we moved into founders. It's like you're looking at metrics every day, every 30 minutes, every second sometimes, right? To see if we're making progress. And so it can be really hard to not take that level of structure into your business. And I know just before we hit record, you and I were talking about I have transitioned my schedule where I only really take calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays now because it was that same thing of like, how many things can I squeeze in a day? But I wasn't getting in that zone. I wasn't finding the thing that lit me up. And it was just like, how many things could I throw in there that I knew, quote unquote, needed to be done? And if you hate doing them or they're stressing you out to do it, it doesn't matter how many times they need to be done. You're always going to procrastinate on it. You're always going to avoid it. And eventually the business is going to feel your feelings as the founder for sure.
And that only becomes harder, right? If your goal is to scale and bring people in, but you're not energized by the work you're doing, then it becomes harder to inspire others as you're continuing to scale. And I follow the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of my day is the green high energy zones. I try and label my calendar in a way that corresponds to green is if I have 70% green on a day, 20% yellow, which is my medium energy zone. So something I can do very competently, but like wouldn't do as my full-time job. And then red, less than 10% of the time, things I do not ever want to touch. And they're very draining. After I do it, I need a glass of wine, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So if you do the 70% green, 20% yellow, 10% red, I found that balance throughout the day, both for entrepreneurs, but also for employees as you're sort of setting up ways for employees to be happier, and it helps with retainment and just making sure they're working towards things they actually enjoy. I found that balance is typically good because you've got your comfort most of the time, but you're getting good stretch goals along the way. And just keeping the energy very high, which you need in startups.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so tangible. I love that. Nowadays, we can color our calendars, we can block our calendar. I mean, there's so much we can do. And sometimes that part is overwhelming in and of itself. It's like, how are you going to structure it? Because you have the full freedom to do so. So I really love that you shared that. That's super helpful. Dane, I'm so glad we got to do this. I have absolutely loved getting to know you and Kayla and Product Hiring House and all of the incredible things that you guys are doing in the industry. I would love to know, just because I think it's the most important question that founders should be able to answer on a regular basis, is what kind of support do you or Product Hiring House need right now?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I think the biggest thing is community, like in terms of physical community. So we've been trying to establish a presence here in San Diego, which is where I'm based, and Kayla's up in Grass Valley, which is fairly remote between like Tahoe and Sacramento, right? So I feel like the opportunity to build community has naturally shifted to San Diego. There's an interesting ecosystem here. People have shifted down from the Bay Area to Southern California to build roots. And I think any interesting events like founder events, both locally here in San Diego, or just like talking to founders and just like hearing and resonating with what they're going through is always very helpful perspective. And I feel like sometimes just having that sounding board and someone who can relate, even when you have co-founders, even if you have a big team, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day emotions of it all. Founders looking to connect and just like chat and have a sounding board, fantastic. And then I think people looking to get involved in communities or who know of really great communities to tap into. I think those are two of the biggest areas that we've been looking at.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that we have all the links to connect directly with Dane and Product Hiring House inside of the show notes. That way you can connect with them. He and Kayla both are super open, super welcoming. So I would encourage you to reach out and have a coffee chat. And I will be in San Diego in January. So this time around, I'm going to meet you on your side of town.
All right, let's do it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Overwhelmed and Over It. That feeling when your to-do list is spiraling out of control and you can't seem to find space to breathe, let alone think strategically about your business? That's exactly why I created the Productivity Quickie, the founder's 15-minute sacred appointment with yourself. Here's the hard truth. The number one thing that keeps brilliant founders stuck isn't lack of ideas or capability. It's feeling buried under an endless to-do list. And this is exactly what the Productivity Quickie is all about. It's your time, 15 minutes a week, to get honest about your priorities, manage your to-do list, and create space to actually enjoy the business that you're building. So right now, I want you to pause and go to gabshayes.com/theproductivityquickie or check the show notes, because when you give yourself this gift of intentional time, everything else falls into place. Until next time, remember, you're not behind, you're not failing, and you've freaking got this. I'm your host, Gabs, and thank you for listening to Overwhelmed and Over It.